Hi, Giorgio. You're very welcome to the show.
James, thank you for having me. This is such a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
Wow, great to have you here, Giorgio. Giorgio, let's talk about Eric von Daniken's birthday party conference that we've just been at in Stuttgart. It's over now. What a turnout. 2,500 people, international. It's not just the numbers, it's the international display of interest into this topic.
Right. It's an amazing, it was an amazing turnout. 2,500 people. That's quite something. And also the speakers were quite awesome. We had Robert Bauval, Graham Hancock, Chandra Wickramasinghe, Robert Salas, Peter Feebach, of course Eric, and truly amazing lectures and interesting stuff. Really, because I think that what we do is we ask questions, and that is what we seem to have forgotten. And that is what, Eric's mission was all his life. When he started to write or explore these things with Chariots of the Gods, which the manuscript he actually finished in 1966, and it was put into serialization for a newspaper or a magazine, and only then did they actually publish the book in 1968 in the German version. And then in 1970, they published the English version, and it was a overnight success. And so, the thing is that Eric is known for Chariots of the Gods, but what many people don't realize, especially in the English-speaking market, or in the English-speaking world, that Eric has written over 35 books since. So Chariots of the Gods, yes, it was his first, and even Eric admits that he was young when he wrote it. There were a couple of mistakes, but just because there's a couple of mistakes does not render the entire theory invalid. In fact, I think it's wonderful that somebody can admit to their mistakes and say, all right, I made a mistake here, I made a mistake there. In fact, there is a 25-year edition or a 20th year edition of Chariots of the Gods that I have. And he actually tells you the page number exactly where, what, and how. And show me another scientist or another explorer who does that. You just want to stay in their thing. But it doesn't discount or invalidate the theory.
Giorgio, I've been to Interlaken to see Eric, and I've seen the books that he has produced. I've seen all the international translations. And I, as an English person, speaking person from the English world that you just spoke about, didn't even know the scale of it. Not only that, the photo archive that man has is absolutely outstanding.
I think right now it's at either 40,000 or 60,000 objects or slides.
Yeah.
And, just a truly amazing place.
There's an archive for the archive, because I had to look at the index to look things up when I was there. It's that big, it's incredible. It's incredible.
And it's all, very meticulously organized. And, now they've tried to, or they've actually digitized the archives, out with the stuff that can be digitized. And, it's just, and this goes back to the 60s. So this is like a lifetime's worth of work.
Giorgio, I did a little preparation today. Is it true you speak 5 languages?
I do, yes.
That's incredible.
I grew up in Switzerland.
Sure.
My mother is from Austria. My dad is from Greece.
Wow.
But I grew up in Switzerland, and both my grandpa and my great-grandpa, they're from Queens, New York.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very international. But, growing up in Switzerland, you have 3 official languages. You have German, French, and Italian. And then there's a fourth, obviously. There's also a fourth official language, but only a few people speak it. I think less than 1,000 or something really dramatic like that. It's Romansh. But growing up in Switzerland, especially in the German-speaking part, it's mandatory to pick a language in school besides English. And so it's one of the official languages. So it's either Italian or French. I chose French.
Wow.
So I think to me, language is the key to the world.
That must be a very useful tool when you're researching all these different countries, all the rock art from all the different places. That must be a great research tool because it's a one-up on everybody else.
And the books I can read, because I have a lot of reference books in German.
Wow.
And therein lies a bit of a challenge, because if you give a reference from a German book then, you have some people telling you, well, how do we know it's a proper translation?
Sure.
Well, that is a giant question that we've had since times immemorial.
Yeah.
Because who knows what has been mistranslated and what hasn't? Because we can prove that mistranslations do exist to this day.
Wow. I'm officially envious, Giorgio, but and there's the thing, I mean, it's only since the internet age that all this research is getting pulled together. I mean, it's really blossomed in the last 20 years. We have shows like Ancient Aliens, as I know. I mean, what is it about Ancient Aliens, Giorgio? The formula is just right. I mean, success. Did you ever see the success of that coming?
No, not at all. And I'm incredibly proud and happy how it all played out, because right now we just began production on season 8.
Awesome.
Season 8. I mean, it's insane. We will break 100 episodes this
incredible.
Season. And, that's something that, sitcoms
dream of
100 episodes,
yeah.
Or dream of, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's a little documentary series that, I mean, this is really, it's the little engine that could, in a weird way, because, we did that first 2-hour pilot, which has become the pilot, as a standalone 2-hour documentary, because it was the 40th anniversary, so to speak, around there, of Chariots of the Gods.
Yeah.
2008, 2009, 2010.
Sure.
And so I was contacted by a company. They said, hey, have you heard of Chariots of the Gods, Eric von Däniken? And I'm like, yes, of course. And they're like, well, is he still alive? And I'm like, yes. And not only that, but I published a magazine with the man. And so, long story short, we made sure that they wouldn't twist our words and things like that. And I have to say, Prometheus Entertainment has done a great job to this day of never twisting or editing your words in a weird way, or that you're taking out of context. Because in many shows, especially 10 years ago, not only did they have debunkers on the shows all the time, but also they would completely take your words out of context. And I think that Ancient Aliens, the fact that we are just allowed to speak our minds, and there is no other side, the other side that we've had for 50 years, so to speak, that say we're saying, oh, you guys are all crazy. Well, let's just have some fun.
Yeah.
And again, all we do is ask questions. The narration on Ancient Aliens, the narrator, he never puts a period at the end of a sentence. It's usually a question mark.
Sure. I just actually had Robert on yesterday, Robert Boval, and he was telling me about the BBC Horizon scandal and how they heavily edited it, and Graham Hancock, of course, with the Horizon scandal. I mean, they went through a lot of abuse, Giorgio. I mean, I think we're now in an era where people are open to this, first of all. That professional debunking is, it's diminished, I think. It's definitely diminished. Let's talk some facts. I want to get some facts. In Search of Aliens, Giorgio, you've gone to Portugal with Peter Daugherty. Now, I've had Peter Daugherty on the show. I love him as well. I mean, what a researcher. Tell us about this egg with what the caduceus symbol on it. This strange art.
So, there is a city in Portugal called Silves. And in Silves, there's a museum of ancient artifacts, also modern stuff, obviously, and contemporary stuff. And in the corner, there's this giant egg. It's about, would you say, 7-8 feet long?
Yeah, better.
And about
big
4 feet wide. So it's a monolith. I mean, it's a giant piece of rock. And on that rock, it's sort of like a cone-shaped, egg-shaped rock. There is a symbol on there that looks like a caduceus, almost like a DNA spiral, a DNA double helix.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the stone is that the image or the carving is not carved into the rock, but it actually protrudes from it, meaning it's almost like 3D, which means at some point the surface of the rock had to be removed to that level that would allow them to reveal, so to speak, this symbol of the caduceus.
Wow.
And
incredible amount of work for that.
Yes, and it's for what? So the whole argument is always that, and especially David Childers is the one who says this, there is some type of lost technology that was used in the past with stone that somehow allowed them to manipulate the stone to their liking. Yeah. Whether it is cutting it or carving it or whatever, or even transporting it, because it perhaps was not the same machine, but it had to have been easy, because you would never in a million years use 500-ton stone blocks to build something unless it was easy for you. And the whole idea about, manpower and this and that, I'm all for that. Of course it was manpower. None of us, and especially myself and Eric, we have never argued that the pyramids were built by aliens, or that the lines of Nazca were landing strips. Yeah. This is all nonsense that's served up by the opposite side, or by people who genuinely believe in those things. Sure. But to us, we never suggested that. What we are suggesting is that at some point, extraterrestrials, flesh and blood beings, visited us. They saw potential in us, and they basically instilled upon us all the knowledge that we'll know in the future. So we were given the basic tools, and we have become who we are today because of our own inventions and our own genius. There's no question in my mind that the human race is genius. But the idea, because a lot of people, they say that
genius for 50,000 years, at least. From the cave paintings onwards.
Right. Many people suggest that the ancient alien or ancient astronaut hypothesis, it undermines human ingenuity. And I disagree with this, because there's no question in my mind that we did everything that we did. However, we've had help, because if human ingenuity were such a certainty, then it would basically imply that if you give birth to someone, you can take that child, put him in the corner somewhere, and for the next 20 years, you just feed the child, you clothe the child, you nourish it, but you don't talk to it, you don't interact with it in that way. Just leave the thing up. Human ingenuity would suggest that 20 years later, you can open the door, walk in, and you will be greeted with a smile and with a hello, and with the outstretched hand. Well, I can guarantee you that does not happen.
Sure.
Why? Because the child has not experienced one thing: schooling. We all have to go to school to become who we are later in life. So the idea that we were schooled back in the day, that is somehow insulting, and that those teachers happen to be extraterrestrial space travelers, I do not see, it's a disconnect to me how you do not see the correlation.
Sure.
Not you, but just
everybody. I know.
James. No, but just, it's just such a bizarre proposition that somehow, because we've had help, that this somehow diminishes our accomplishments.
Yeah.
On the contrary.
Usually from the anthropologist, that angle. It's usually from the anthropologist. On that matter, let's talk skulls. I know you've been to Malta and you got your hands on some strange skulls there. I mean, I actually was in Malta about 3 weeks ago, and I asked to see them, but they wouldn't let them. They wouldn't let me. I went professionally. I did professionally ask them, through my engineering qualifications to get and have a look, and I just said no. Refused, point blank. But tell us about these Malta skulls, because you have had them in your hands. They're not on show. But
no, they're not on show, and we've been incredibly lucky to get the opportunity to film with those skulls. I mean, they were somewhere in a box in the back of the museum. I mean, they were not on display. And what was so interesting is that one of the skulls, they're very old. We all have these
sagittal sutures
in our skull, and they ossify throughout your life. But whether or not they ossify, in the end, you still see those sutures. Well, one of those skulls there didn't have the suture that we all have on top of our skulls, completely gone. And when I asked, they said, "Oh, it's because of ossification." But if you have ossification, which every person has by the end of their life, you still see the fine little groove.
The crevice or the groove.
Yeah, exactly. Of the suture. And the fact that there's nothing there, and not even under a microscope or under a magnifying glass could you see any traces. So I asked, are you going to investigate this? Are you going to DNA test this or something? No, we're not interested. So that to me as well is a disconnect, because scientists, anthropologists should be on that, like, they should be drawn to that like mosquitoes to light.
They should be, yeah.
They really should be.
What's the shape of them like? Was there another strange, I don't know if they're cone-shaped or elongated, but they're certainly misshapen or unusual.
Well, they are. When I went there, the production team told me that there were going to be big elongated heads.
Okay.
And I had never heard of that. So, and I'm pretty tuned into where is what. So I was curious, because I was like, maybe this is something that is new and this is really cool. So when the skulls were presented to us, they were not something out of the ordinary where I would say, holy crap, this is an elongated skull, or this is like a cone shape. It was more, the top of the head was definitely a little bit longer, but it wasn't as pronounced as, for example, the skulls that we can find in Peru. So I would not call them elongated heads. Also, I have to say, they were not, some of them were not complete, they were fragmentary.
Sure.
What was interesting is that I think those skulls came from the Hypogeum in Malta. And allegedly, at some point, there were over 7,000 skeletons that were, or just heads, that were inside that Hypogeum. And then with the Second World War, all skeletons or all skulls disappeared. And apparently those are some of the last remnants. I don't know where this appeared or what happened, but the fact that the ones that I was able to look at, that it didn't have that suture, that was completely gone. Because I shared that image with my father, who's a doctor, and also I consulted with two other physicians on my own time, and I showed them the pictures, and they're like, "Yeah, this is weird."
Bizarre. Would you call them a group of? Would you call it a race of people, or a certain group, or a group of hominids? Would you call them in their own class a certain group, or a different?
Elongated heads.
Yeah, in Malta.
Well, it's not. It has not been classified. According to archaeology, these elongated heads do not exist. According to archaeology, these elongated heads are all hoaxes. According to mainstream archaeology, these elongated heads are nothing else but artificial creations by our ancestors, that the cranial deformation has been achieved by artificial means, for example, and there are cultures that have done this, no question, where they would put, after a child is born or during infancy, they would put boards around the head, and so that bind it very tightly so that the head would essentially grow in that particular fashion. And the reason for that is cargo cult behavior. Imitation.
Yeah.
Who are they imitating? They're gods. Well, what gods? And that's a whole different discussion. But what I find so fascinating is that the current mainstream archaeological proposition is that these elongated skull people, they suggest that they are human beings or human skulls that were elongated by artificial means. We have to remember that. Well, medically speaking, if this happened, I'm going all over the place. So they say that these elongated skull people were part of the elite. They were the rulers of those societies. They were looked upon as gods, or at least descendants of the gods, or they wanted to be like the gods. So, what nobody talks about is that medically speaking, if you elongate a head, the volume of the brain will still stay the same. Yes, the brain will grow in that direction, but due to the elongation of the skull, you will inevitably end up with water on the brain. Now, once you have water in the brain, I can assure you, you cannot rule a society.
Sure.
So, I mean, this is just a medical fact. And so it's all this stuff that's being proposed by, wonderful people, but nobody questions it.
No.
So I have to say to you that when I saw those skulls personally for the first time, not behind a museum glass, because I've seen them behind museum glass for 25 years, but seeing them up close and being able to handle them, I mean, it's insane. You are confronted with a hammer to your face.
Mystery, just
completely. As in, what is this? What is it?
No.
Or who is it?
Giorgio, you mentioned the hypogeum. I'm glad you mentioned that because I got to go recently to the hypogeum and I got to test out the acoustics. I was the only male because he only allowed 10 people in at a time on the tour, and I was the only male in the group because there was a group of Italian schoolgirls there, myself and my other half, and I got to arm into the thing, the oracle chamber, and I could feel the chamber resonate. I have no doubt the acoustics of that is very, very sophisticated.
Oh yeah, no, that place is
it's off the charts.
It really is. And all these underground structures are all quite amazing. I mean, you have Derinkuyu in Turkey, you have the Hypogeum in Malta, and Luc Bürgen, a publisher of Mysteries magazine from Switzerland, he presented a lecture at our conference here in Stuttgart about a new cave system that has been discovered in 2002 or something in China.
Yeah.
And there's multiple cave systems there. And I should rephrase this, they're not cave systems in the conventional sense, that they're of natural occurrence. They're a system of giant chambers that have been artificially hewn out of the bedrock.
Wow.
Deep in the ground. Did you see the pictures?
Yeah. I didn't understand because he was speaking German, but I did see the shamanic art on the ceilings as well.
Yes. And and 46 different chambers just in one tunnel system alone.
Wow.
I think he said there's like 12 different chamber systems all over the place, and everything artificial. Most of the stuff is now still underwater or filled with water because it's an area with rivers and rainwater and things like that. So they're trying to get the funding for further excavations to open up other tourist attractions or tourist places for people to attend. Because it's magnificent. I mean, you go straight into the ground, into the bedrock. It's
incredible.
15 degrees Celsius year round, whether it's 30 degrees Celsius outside in the summer or 2 degrees in the winter outside. It's temperature of the earth.
Yeah.
It's 15 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
So, it's just an amazing bit. But why did they build it? Not a single piece of writing, no tools, no bones, nothing was found. I mean, they look like giant industrial halls.
Yeah, for sure. Pictures are amazing. I can't wait to see more research done. And China's got a lot more secrets to give us. I mean, look at the pyramids there. There's not a lot of research to come out on the pyramids.
But what I hear is that most of these places are in military zones and things like that. And then, of course, you have to wonder, why are they military zones?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but stuff like that I always find incredibly curious.
Egypt, too. I know there's a lot of military installations in some near the pyramids and some of the forgotten pyramids, not the mainstream tourist ones. When Robert Salos was giving his speech today about nuclear disarmament by UFOs, that must have really piqued your interest. I know you've looked at the Vedic text. You must have thought about the Mahabharata. You must have been considering that, Giorgio.
Sure. I don't consider myself a ufologist. I think always that the UFOs that I talk about happened 5,000 years ago,
sure,
or sooner, or later. But when you hear stories that are based on factual evidence that government officials have come forward to corroborate stories that in the 60s and 70s, nuclear silos were disarmed and rendered useless while UFOs were hovering around, well, you can't dismiss those stories. We simply can't. And so in reference to, nuclear weapons and ancient texts, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, ancient Indian epics in the Vedas, there are references that could be interpreted as descriptions of deployments of weapons of mass destruction, i.e. Nuclear weapons, because it describes how upon this force, this weapon was unleashed from a flying chariot, nonetheless, that the sun would split into 4 suns. The sun would start dancing in the sky. The elephants had no idea what was going on, so they were running in fear. And after the big explosion, or after the big light, silence overfell the land. And after that, the water was contaminated. People's hair started to fall out, and they started to have boils on their skin. This is all described in ancient Indian texts. And, that is nothing else to me but a description of potential description of nuclear fallout, radiation fallout.
Sure.
And, if a society is not shielded, or a person is not shielded from radiation, well, your hair falls out. You have boils on your skin. It's not a good situation. So, and there we have it. We have it in a story, or in legends that are 1,500 years old or even older. Especially when it comes to Sanskrit. Some suggest that Sanskrit was there even before Sumerian writing.
Sure. Let's go back into the past where we're in the safe zone, Giorgio. Let's go 5,000 years ago. I mean, look at the Anunnaki of Sumeria. Although we have the Ubaid figurines as well from 4200 BC. And then, they seem to be sort of a reptilian look of them. I mean, do you think there's like a multitude of races out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like there's multiple races on planet Earth, it's out there. See, I think that the entire idea that everything is so different out there, to me, is a fallacy.
Yeah.
Because life clearly developed here according to a certain pattern. And to suggest that if there's another planet, or if there are other planets out there that feature or offer the same type of parameters that planet Earth offers, i.e., Earth-like planets that they're discovering, every week now, which is really awesome. We live in very exciting times. That it has to be so different on those planets. Eric said something very interesting in his speech today. Of course, it's completely and utterly possible that there are planets with flying crocodiles or flying trees that can talk to each other.
Sure.
But that does not mean that there aren't other planets out there that have humanoid life like you and me. And the reason for that is that we have started to ask the wrong questions. Because the question I'm always asked is, well, what do you think extraterrestrials look like? And we have to step back for a moment, because when we look at the Bible, because the ancient astronaut theory suggests that Earth, or a long time ago, our ancestors received visits from extraterrestrials, and they made us, or gave us, culture, and in doing so, they also, before doing that, they also changed our genetic makeup with a deliberate artificial mutation of our genes. So that's the basic premise of the ancient astronaut theory. So if that is the case, then the question shouldn't be what do the extraterrestrials look like, but do we look like the extraterrestrials?
Sure.
If they meddled with our genetic makeup. So, and now if you establish that idea, then you can suggest, all right, if we should ever go out there to visit another planet, we're not going to go, and this is bringing back to Eric's point, we're not going to go to the planet with the flying, talking trees, but we're going to go to a planet where I can look you in the eye like what we're doing right now. Because that makes more sense.
Yeah.
And we'll also not go to a planet that cannot support life like you and me. Why? For what? I mean, we want to go after a journey in a spaceship to be able to, breathe the air and whatever, and just have a good time for a little while.
On the genes element then, I mean, there's a lot of research into monatomic gold. I've done a couple of shows on some fascinating stuff, and they reckon that they can repair the telomeres on the DNA strands now to stop aging. Perhaps we could attain one day what the ancients had, this long life, this like longevity that they all speak about.
Well, that's a great point that you should bring up, because the way I look at it, when you hear about Enoch's or Methuselah's old age, 900 some years, if you approach those types of chronologies or those types of ages of people, if you factor in the idea, look at that from the perspective of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, what if what we have here is a physical manifestation or physical evidence for the time dilation phenomenon that everybody will or could experience if they travel close to the speed of light? Because the twin paradox suggests that if two people or twin brothers, if a twin brother stays on Earth and the other twin goes in a spaceship and they fly, and obviously this is all hypothetical, but the math is solid. Math is math. It's fact.
Sure.
That the clock on the spaceship, because if you have a wristwatch, you will look at your wristwatch on that spaceship and it will be the way it was on Earth. However, because you are going at almost the speed of light or close to it, time on Earth goes much, much faster. And so you can come back after 5 years, and this is not a proper calculation. You can come back in 5 years on your spaceship. 5 years have elapsed on the spaceship, but 500 years or 50 years or whatever the calculation is have elapsed on Earth. And it's really wonderful how they portrayed it in Interstellar, that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Really fascinating. I didn't like the movie, but certain parts were great.
For sure.
So what if, because all those people had these interactions with these, extraterrestrials, and they were told, or we can read that some of them were taken up in chariots, or in fiery ovens and things like that. What if they themselves experienced time dilation on their own bodies?
I know you've spoken about this before. Gateway of the Sun, 28,000 years, Giorgio. I mean, not only are they ignoring these timelines of the people, but the timelines of some of these monuments too. I mean, 28,000 years is a big difference to what we're told to accept.
Right. What you're referring to is an artifact, a gate in Tiwanaku in Bolivia. And it's this magnificent place that defies logic. You're at an altitude of almost 13,000 feet. So the air is incredibly rarefied. I urge everyone to just take it easy for the first 2 days when you get to La Paz to acclimatize yourself. Drink lots of cocoa tea, because that will make you feel better. And then I urge you to go visit this place called Tiwanaku. It's a pre-Inca archaeological site that features a little area called Pumapunku. And you will see stone blocks there that will boggle your mind. Absolutely insane. Many of those blocks are carved out of sandstone. Nobody ever said that there's no sandstone there. In fact, the majority of blocks there are red sandstone.
Yeah.
But amongst those red sandstone blocks, you also find quite a lot of gray stones. And that gray stone is andesite.
Extremely hard.
It's igneous rock. It's like on the Mohs scale from 1 to 10, which defines the hardness of rock or the density, I think it's a number 7. And the only thing, and so the question is, how were these blocks cut? Because physics dictates that you can only carve something of
Sure.
that hardness either with something that's equally as hard or harder. Not so the idea that these things were carved with copper tools or that they were carved with chicken bones, all of which has been proposed, by the way. It doesn't. It's not wishful thinking. It's physically impossible. I mean, the argument should just be eliminated because it's physically impossible. So the only thing that we're left with then is that it was either done with, it's one argument there was that this was done with some type of high-tech tools. Like with diamond drills or some type of
machining.
Yes, exactly. And there are spots where you can see the saw marks where a little mistake was made. Like, for example, in Egypt, you can see saw marks on different
Tool slip.
andesite, statues. A little slip, exactly, where the engineer or the worker made a little bit of a mistake. But it's amazing how little mistakes can be found. And, the markings and the cuts, and it is so incredibly precise. There's one rock at Pumapunku, a little monolith, reaches to halfway to your hip, and it has a fine groove on one side that is perfect from top to bottom, and in the groove itself are holes that equidistantly were drilled into that rock, and they not only were drilled in equidistance, but the holes themselves also are equidistant. So, I mean, you cannot do this with copper tools. I mean, I would be the first one to admit if somebody can show to me, I'm going to cut an andesite block with a copper tool. If you can show that to me, even on YouTube, I don't care,
for sure.
I'll agree with you. All right?
For sure.
But it's physically impossible. And so, what's interesting at Tiwanaku is that this gate has all these different glyphs. They're not hieroglyphs. I misspoke. Skeptics, I misspoke. It happens. So there are these glyphs, and multiple mainstream archaeologists, like Arthur Poznansky, for example, they have attempted to translate what was going on. And they came to the conclusion that some of this stuff that they talk about is so far out that they talk about thousands of years in the past where, something happened, that this place was a place of worship that developed over time because something happened, and, really crazy stuff.
New discovery there too. There's a pyramid, alleged pyramid under the ground.
Right. And by the way, I have to take back. They're not glyphs. They're just symbols or images. And through the addition and subtraction and multiplication of those different symbols or carvings, they then determined that according to it's a calendar, according to their idea, or Poznansky's idea. And that the date of the calendar goes back 28,000 years. But that is not accepted. Now, do I know for a fact it's 28,000 years? No, because I'm not a mathematician, and so I did not make those calculations. But I will trust an archaeologist if they come up with stuff like that.
Sure.
And so now, the really cool thing is, which would, in my opinion, corroborate the 28,000-year-old question or 28,000-year idea or proposition, when I think it was season 4 or season 3 of Ancient Aliens, we were able to cut a stone from Pumapunku to see what would happen if we cut it with laser. Because a lot of people, they wonder, how is it cut? And many times they propose laser technology. And, I'll be honest with you, I personally never subscribed to the laser cutting idea. But when I was approached to have it tested, to cut a rock with a laser, of course I said, yes, let's do it right away. Let's see what the result is. And it was quite revealing, because we went to Christopher Dunn, who
Oh,
built
yeah.
the Giza power plant. We went to his shop, and he's a mechanical engineer, and in real life, well, he retired recently, but in real life, he used to build precision airplane parts.
Space age stuff.
Yes, so really, really, you know, the guy knew his stuff, and so did his staff and his coworkers. I mean, they were all, you know, smart, bright people.
I love Chris Dunn's work. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's a great guy. And so we put that piece, we used a $750,000
Machine?
piece of equipment
Wowzer.
with that laser. And really privileged and honored to be able to use that thing. And we put on our protective glasses and all standing around with the cameras rolling. So he turns on the machine and whoosh, the laser comes out and just does its thing. You can see it cut through the rock, sparks flying and this and that. And Chris Dunn, of course, he's just standing with a smile, because he too doesn't agree that lasers were used at Puma Punku or anywhere in the world for that matter back in the day. That some other technology might have been used or was used, not might, it was. But he already knew what the result was going to be after that laser cut. So the thing fell off. He turned off the machine, and he grabbed it, and with a big smile on his face, like, here's your Nat Puma Punku rock.
Yeah.
And what happened? The area where the rock was cut by the laser turned black, globulized, crystallized, like glass, like a complete, because laser is heat technology. It's bundled light to an incredible high amount of degrees. And so, yes, it can be used to cut. We use it in medicine all the time. But for rock, it doesn't work. Now, what we also did was, have you been to Puma Punku?
I've only been to Peru and Bolivia now.
You must go. It's truly amazing. But what many people don't realize when they look at those pictures of, let's say, the H blocks or you know, most of the andesite blocks at Puma Punku, they look rough. But if you go and touch them, they are the surface is as smooth as glass. Wow. It's truly extraordinary. It does not translate in pictures, but it translates obviously when you're there in person and you can touch the stuff. If the stuff was not, you know, chiseled or whatever, because it's too perfect, it's almost as if they were like prefabricated blocks that they were poured in place, which would imply that they knew how to melt andesite, for Christ's sake. So what he then did too is he used a diamond drill to cut also another part of the Puma Punku rock, and sure enough, the side of the rock that was drilled with or cut with a diamond drill was very smooth, almost like the actual original Puma Punku side of the rock.
Incredible.
But the Puma Punku side of the rock was, even though it's smooth,
wasn't black.
It was as porous. It was porous and it looked weathered. The newly cut side with the diamond drill or with the diamond cutter was perfectly smooth, really amazing. I mean, truly like steel almost. And so I looked at this and I was like, wait a second, what if Puma Punku really is 28,000 years old? Because what if it was done with diamond drills or whatever,
then weathered?
Due to the erosion and the weathering, it turned into whatever it is today.
Yeah, for sure.
And I asked that to Christopher Dunn, and without hesitation, he said, yes, that is a possibility. Even though he didn't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't like it. It's and I take that back, Chris. It was another idea. Because I disagree with any and all Wikipedia entries that say that Puma Punku is 1,000 years old. Forget it. It's much older than that. Yeah. And unfortunately, we can't date stone. Yeah. So that is the main problem. I mean, there are methods, by the way, with which to test stone.
Oh yeah.
However, it's incredibly expensive, and as you know, it's not being used very often.
It's not widespread.
Archaeologists, because not only is it expensive, but each time, and you can read this, you can Google this, you can do your research on this. Perhaps not each time, but on a majority of occasions when this testing method was used on stone, it always yielded an older date than what accepted archaeology plays with or deals with.
Sure.
So I think that these all these stone testing methods, even if there was funding, they would still not do it because it completely interferes with the current established house of cards that is archaeology.
Sure. Almost out of time, Giorgio. Chris is a good friend of the show. He's been on several times, and he actually coached me when I went to this Serapeum in Egypt. He told me what to look for and what to measure as an engineer. And these boxes in the Serapeum, they're like a space age mirror flat surface to within 1,000th of an inch flat. You know, you can see your reflection in them.
I'm sitting here right now and I have goosebumps just thinking about it.
You can see your reflection in it. And I had the camcorder with the LED light, and I flashed it, and you could just see the mirror reflection. You know, it's like polished like a mirror. Basalt, like 70-ton boxes, carried from 500 miles away.
And the lids that fit on top.
Yeah, but I think they were used to bury bulls. That's the current theory.
Well, here's the thing. That is only half of the story, because, as we know, in Egypt it was law and religion that after the death of any living being, they have to be mummified. So there are millions of mummified remains that have been found, not just from people, but
cats,
mummified cats, crocodiles, but not only that, mummified spiders.
Really?
Mummified, everything was mummified. So, and there are entire galleries of mummies of the animal kingdom. And so that is established fact, and even archaeologists or Egyptologists, they're the ones who proposed that this was the law, that everything needs to be mummified. Well, when those giant boxes, the Serapeum or in Saqqara, were discovered, they were obviously intact, or at least one of the boxes was still intact, sealed, and it even had still a flower on top from the burial. But when the archaeologists or Egyptologists, and this was in the early 1900s, when they went to open those boxes, or that particular box, what they found was not because they did, like you said, they thought they had found the final resting place of the sacred Apis bull, which was a divinity or deity in ancient Egypt, a beautiful bull with a cross or a star on his forehead, and the origin of that bull is the sky, or it's the stars as well. So they thought that they had finally found one mummy of that bull, and so in front of the press, they opened that box, and much to their surprise, they didn't find any mummy in there, but a black, stinky mass.
Bitumen,
exactly, with ground up bones.
Wow.
Of unknown animals, of just fragmentary parts of bones, fragments of bones. And what does it mean? What is this? This is completely against Egyptian law at the time. So, the idea that Eric von Daniken has proposed is that what if those stories of these hybrid beings back in the day, half animal, half man, what if they were true, that those were genetic creations, experiments by the extraterrestrials, and once or after the extraterrestrials left, the priesthood that was left in Egypt, they were told that, you can't mess with these animals while we're here. But now that the extraterrestrials were gone, the priests thought, you know what? We don't want these things around. We don't want them to come back. What I didn't establish is the reason why everything was mummified is so that for the afterlife and also for resurrection in future, in case so that the bodies would be preserved. So, what if their belief was such that after those animals died, that instead of mummifying them, which they quote unquote should have done, right? They were like, no, these are too terrifying. They're monsters. You know, we don't want that anymore. And so they made sure that after they died, to
seal
them up and put them into that massive pit and put a 70-ton lid on top of it, just to make sure that whatever creatures these were, that they would never come back.
Wow.
Now this is a fantastical idea. I agree. It sounds like science fiction, but if you know the topic, if you know the parameters, and if you know all the actors that you're dealing with in this whole play that was ancient Egypt.
Context, all the context.
And the context, thank you. Then all of a sudden, it starts to make sense. You just have to accept it. I mean, that's the whole thing with anything anyway. That, you know, you have to be open-minded. We are no longer open-minded. We think we have all the answers to everything, and the truth of the matter is, we don't.
No. Giorgio, we're out of time. One quick question. Will we see In Search of Aliens another season?
I don't know. Season 1 was very well received, but the History Channel is now moving Ancient Aliens back from H2 to the History Channel, and they're now debating whether they should bring back In Search of Aliens for the history or still in H2. It's all in the works. I don't know. It has not yet been renewed. So we'll see what happens.
The archive, because I had to look at the index to look things up when I was there. It's that big, you know. Yes. It's incredible. It's incredible.
And it's all, you know, very meticulously organized. And, you know, now they've tried to, or they've actually digitized the archives. You know, out with the stuff that can be digitized. And, you know, it's just, and this goes back to the 60s. You know, so this is like a lifetime's worth of work.
Giorgio, I did a little preparation today. Is it true you speak 5 languages?
I do, yes.
That's incredible.
I grew up in Switzerland. My mother is from Austria. My dad is from Greece.
Wow.
But I grew up in Switzerland, and both my grandpa and my great-grandpa, they're from Queens, New York.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very international. But, you know, growing up in Switzerland, you have 3 official languages. You have German, French, and Italian. And then there's a fourth, obviously. There's also a fourth official language, but only a few people speak it. I think less than 1,000 or something really dramatic like that. It's Romansh. But growing up in Switzerland, especially in the German-speaking part, it's mandatory to pick a language in school besides English. And so it's one of the official languages. So it's either Italian or French. I chose French.
Wow.
So I think to me, language is the key to the world.
That must be a very useful tool when you're researching all these different countries, all the rock art from all the different places. You know, that must be a great research tool because, you know, it's a one-up on everybody else.
And the books I can read, because I have a lot of reference books in German.
Wow.
You know, and they're like, well, is he still alive? And I'm like, yes. And not only that, but I publish a magazine with the man. And so, long story short, we made sure that they wouldn't twist our words and things like that. And I have to say, Prometheus Entertainment has done a great job to this day of never twisting or editing your words in a weird way or that you're taking out of context. Because in many shows, especially 10 years ago, not only did they have debunkers on the shows all the time, but also they would completely take your words out of context. And I think that Ancient Aliens, the fact that we are just allowed to speak our minds, and there is no other side, the other side that we've had for 50 years, so to speak, that say we're saying, oh, you guys are all crazy. Well, let's just have some fun.
Yeah.
You know, and again, all we do is ask questions. If the narration on Ancient Aliens, the narrator, he never puts a period at the end of a sentence. It's usually a question mark.
Sure. You know, I just actually had Robert on yesterday, Robert Boval, and he was telling me about the BBC Horizon scandal and how they heavily edited it, and Graham Hancock, of course, with the Horizon scandal. I mean, they went through a lot of abuse, Giorgio. I mean, I think we're now in an era where people are open to this, first of all. That professional debunking is, you know, it's diminished, I think. It's definitely diminished. You know, let's talk some facts. I want to get some facts. In Search of Aliens, Giorgio, you've gone to Portugal with Peter Daugherty. Now, I've had Peter Daugherty on.
A newspaper or a magazine, and only then did they actually publish a book in 1968 in the German version. And then in 1970, they published the English version, and it was a overnight success. And so, you know, the thing is that Eric is known for Chariots of the Gods, but what many people don't realize, especially in the English-speaking market, that or in the English-speaking world, that Eric has written over 35 books since. So Chariots of the Gods, yes, it was his first, and you know, even Eric admits that he was young when he wrote it. There were a couple of mistakes, but just because there's a couple of mistakes does not render the entire theory invalid. In fact, I think it's wonderful that somebody can admit to their mistakes and say, all right, I made a mistake here, I made a mistake there. In fact, there is a 25-year edition or a 20th year edition of Chariots of the Gods that I have. And he actually tells you the page number exactly where, what, and how. And show me another scientist or another explorer who does that. You just want to stay in their thing. But it doesn't discount or invalidate the theory.
You know, Giorgio, I've been to Interlaken to see Eric, and I've seen the books that he has produced. I've seen all the international translations. And I, as an English person, speaking person from the English world that you just spoke about, didn't even know the scale of it. Not only that, the photo archive that man has is absolutely outstanding.
I think right now it's at either 40,000 or 60,000 objects or slides.
Yeah.
And, you know, just a truly amazing place.
There's an archive for Hi, Giorgio. You're very welcome to the show.
James, thank you for having me. This is such a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
Wow, great to have you here, Giorgio. Giorgio, I mean, let's talk about Eric von Daniken's birthday party conference that we've just been at in Stuttgart. It's over now. What a turnout. 2,500 people, international. I mean, it's not just the numbers, it's the international display of interest into this topic. I mean,
right. I mean, it's an amazing, it was an amazing turnout. 2,500 people. That's quite something. And also the speakers were quite awesome. We had Robert Boval, Graham Hancock, Chandra Wickramasinghe, Robert Salas, Peter Feebach, of course Eric, and you know, truly amazing lectures and interesting stuff. Really, because I think that what we do is we ask questions, and that is what we seem to have forgotten. And that is what, you know, Eric's mission was all his life. I mean, when he started to write or explore these things with Chariots of the Gods, which the manuscript he actually finished in 1966, and it was put into serialization for a bit of a challenge, because if you give a reference from a German book, then, you know, you have some people telling you, well, how do we know it's a proper translation? Well, that is a giant question that we've had since times immemorial. Because who knows what has been mistranslated and what hasn't? Because we can prove that mistranslations do exist to this day.
Wow. I'm officially envious, Giorgio, but, you know, and there's the thing, I mean, it's only since the internet age that all this research is getting pulled together. I mean, it's really blossomed in the last 20 years. We have shows like Ancient Aliens, as I know. I mean, what is it about Ancient Aliens, Giorgio? The formula is just right. I mean, success. Did you ever see the success of that coming?
No, not at all. And you know, I'm incredibly proud and happy how it all played out, because right now we just began production on season 8.
Awesome.
Season 8. I mean, it's insane. We will break 100 episodes this
incredible.
season. And, you know, that's something that, you know, sitcoms
dream of
100 episodes,
yeah.
or dream of, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's a little documentary series that, I mean, this is really, it's the little engine that could, in a weird way, because, you know, we did that first 2-hour pilot, which has become the pilot, as a standalone 2-hour documentary, because it was the 40th anniversary, so to speak, around there, of Chariots of the Gods.
Yeah.
2008, 2009, 2010.
Sure.
And so I was contacted by a company. They said, hey, have you heard of Chariots of the Gods, Eric von Däniken? I'm like, yes, of course. And they're